As we approach next week, there is the possibility we could see tropical cyclone development in the main development region. Taking a look at the latest depiction of the European model at this time, we do have a tropical wave now moving through the main development region. However, this area isn't expected to have any sort of chance of developing into a tropical cyclone, mainly due to the fact that the wind shear is just very strong. There's going to be an upper level low that's going to be located just to the north of the Caribbean islands that's going to continuously bring a stream of strong upper level winds right over the Caribbean as well as the main development region. So it's going to be very difficult for this area of moisture to create a closed center circulation and for all that energy to converge over one area for the wind speed and the pressure to lower for this to have a potential of developing into a tropical storm. Moving forward with what the European model is stating, we do see that this area of moisture will remain somewhat consolidated, but at the same time very spread out, and it's going to be too spread out to the point where not enough energy will converge over one area for a closed center circulation to develop and for the pressure to lower. And part of this area of moisture is expected to move southward into the northern portion of South America, which will continue to inhibit the chance that this develops into a tropical storm. So as a result of the strong wind shear and the land interaction, this isn't expected to have any sort of chance of developing, and it's very certain at this time because this tropical wave is expected to approach the Caribbean right around the 72 to 96 hour range, which will play a big role in terms of the certainty with the forecast. The certainty is very high, so there's very little to no chance that this will develop into a tropical storm. However, taking a look at the tropical wave for next week, there is a higher possibility moving forward with what the European model is currently stating. We do see that eventually a tropical wave should be right in the middle of the main development region, about right around the July 11th time frame, and it should be over sea surface temperatures that are above 80 degrees. So there is, of course, pretty much with any trough that moves over the warmer waters during the middle of the Atlantic hurricane season always has that potential of developing into a tropical storm, no matter the conditions surrounding it. Of course, there's a possibility that it will be very less likely, but we've seen plenty of times where a tropical storm develops despite the fact that the National Hurricane Center does not list it as having a potential of developing. So when it comes to any low pressure system that moves over the main development region during the heart of the hurricane season, it's always something to watch. And right here we do see that the European model at least wants to develop a strong enough low pressure system for the forecast model to identify a low pressure system icon right over this area of moisture. So there is potentially that possibility that maybe there could be enough convection. However, while the European model does not develop this, it's at least something to be aware of. But there's still other factors we need to take a look at before we can determine this will have a chance at developing into a tropical storm, mainly the wind shear and the amount of dry air over the main development region. Taking a look at what the European model is forecasting when it comes to the amount of relative humidity that's expected to exist right over the main development region right by next week, we do see that there's going to be quite a bit of dry air, especially on the eastern portion of this storm system, while there is a decent amount of moisture just to the northwest of this storm system. Now, we're going to need to wait and see really how much dry air will move into the main development region by the time we approach next week. The GFS model is leaning towards a little bit more moisture existing, while the European model is a little bit more optimistic that there will be a higher level of dry air and a higher level of Saharan dust right over the main development region, which will create a temperature inversion for stability to exist over this storm system. We're going to need to wait and see, but it's good to keep in mind that we're still very early in the hurricane season, and typically during the month of July, it isn't uncommon for dry air and the Saharan dust to completely swallow up the main development region. So that could certainly inhibit the storm's chances of developing into a tropical cyclone. And that's exactly what the European model is forecasting right here, where there's just going to be a lot of dry air surrounding it. And while maybe it could be embedded in a small envelope of moisture that will fend off the dry air surrounding it, we still do see that there's a high concentration of Saharan dust just to the east of this storm system. So that could certainly inhibit this storm's chances of developing. This it's still highly uncertain though, because look at the forecast hour I'm going at. This is beyond the 7-day mark, so there's still time to iron out the forecast. Right now, the most likely scenario is that this will still remain as a tropical wave, not become anything more than that. But there's still a lot of time for the forecast to change. I'll keep you guys updated over the next several days. Another major factor that will play a role in whether or not this tropical wave develops into a tropical storm or not is the amount of wind shear. And there's expected to be an upper level low that's gonna persist right over the northern, just to the north of the Caribbean, which will create a strong amount of upper level winds right over the southern Caribbean as well as the main development region. And that could certainly be one of the inhibitors as this tropical wave continues to move further westward, and from other multiple tropical waves that would move further westward. So continuing to move forward with the forecast, we see that this upper level low really doesn't change its position much, as it moves very slowly to the east, and the strong upper level winds associated with this upper level low are still persisting. And I think that will be the main catalyst that would completely destroy the tropical wave's chances of developing into a tropical storm, as we see it persist even by the time we approach July 12th, where the tropical wave would be located right around this area, and that would mean that it'll be under very strong wind shear. There's still time to iron out the forecast. The position of this upper level low will be key, and we do see that the main development region, at least in this small area, is dealing with a light amount of wind shear. So that certainly could enhance the possibility that maybe this tropical wave could develop a little bit more early on. But with tropical waves, we need to realize that they take time to develop a well-consolidated center circulation. The area of convection needs to find an area where the pressure is low enough for all that energy to converge around, and that takes time, and sometimes it's difficult when we have so many thunderstorms and areas of convective activity developing over a large area where the energy and the air molecules move all over the place rather than in just one consolidated area. And so there might not necessarily be enough time for the tropical wave to develop just before the strong wind shear comes through, and the dry air will only inhibit it even more so we're definitely going to need to wait and see how this tropical wave moves through the eastern Atlantic, and how the position of this upper level low to determine how long of an area it will have where the conditions are favorable for this to develop into a tropical storm. At this point, I'll say it's less likely that this will develop into a tropical storm next week, but we need to be aware of all possibilities when it comes to a forecast that's this far out. So I'll keep you guys updated regarding any changes. The GFS model is showing a very similar scenario to the European model when it comes to the future of this tropical wave, where the GFS model also doesn't expect this tropical wave to necessarily develop into a tropical storm by next week. And in fact, the GFS model is less confident that that will occur, since the GFS model expects the moisture to move a lot further southward than the European model. And what that means is that, of course, the Coriolis effect will have less of an impact on the center of circulation, which means that there will be less rotation, and as a result, wind speeds that are too weak for this to be considered of having any possibility of developing into a tropical storm. And not only that, the further southward it moves, the more likely it's going to interact with land. So in terms of the more long-term future of this tropical wave, the chances will certainly be inhibited, since it'll deal with a lot of land interaction due to the northern portion of South America, moving in its pretty much right over its journey on westward. So that's why the GFS model is predicting that there's even less of a chance of this developing into a tropical wave. But again, still a lot of days to iron out the forecast. We do see that there's still more moisture in the GFS model scenario. So if we were to see this moisture move, we do see less dry air in the GFS model scenario. So if we were to see this moisture move a little bit further northward, then there could be that possibility that the chance will be even higher that this develops than what the European model is forecasting. So that's something to keep in mind. I'll keep you guys updated regarding all changes in the scenarios. Take a look at the global tropics hazards outlook over the next 2 weeks. We see that for the week beginning July 12th, there is expected to be an influx of moisture moving through the main development region. However, like I said, the strong wind shear as well as the amount of dry air right over the main development region will likely diminish much of any high chance that a tropical storm does develop. But still a lot of days for that forecast to change depending on the amount of wind shear over the main development region. So I'll keep you guys updated, and that's expected to continue even moving on to week 3, which is a week ending July 25th, where there is expected to be a higher amount of moisture than usual right over the main development region. And here's what the European Ensemble members are stating at this time when it comes to the future of this tropical wave. We do see that a decent amount of Ensemble members do want to at least develop a well-defined low pressure system, where we do see some of them develop this close to tropical storm status. So it's at least something to be aware of by next week right around the Caribbean. Even if this doesn't develop, this could still bring an enhanced amount of rainfall. But outside of that, there's not really much to worry about when it comes to the possibility of tropical storm formation. Take a look at the GFS Ensemble members. We do clearly see that the GFS model is less confident that there's going to be any chance of tropical storm formation. We do see a couple of Ensemble members, but much less Ensemble members are confident that any sort of well-defined low pressure system or tropical wave will develop just to the east of the Caribbean. So that's certainly something we're going to need to be aware of when making this forecast as well. But it's still too far out to say for certain that this has a low chance of developing, considering the fact that the European model is forecasting a more well-defined low pressure system to exist right over the main development region. So here's my overall forecast when it comes to the next potential tropical storm that may develop by next week. So it's still too soon to say if we're going to see this develop into a tropical storm or have a high chance or a low chance or no chance at all. Right now, the computer models are leaning to a less likely chance, as they aren't at least the main computer models aren't developing this into a tropical storm just yet. However, this forecast is still subject to change, but I'll say it's less likely at this point. But thank you guys for watching, and make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather related content.